Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, Module Leader for TECH3501. I can draw a breath for a moment. This is the overview summary video of the 14th lecture for TECH3501 Community Media Leadership. And this one, continuing, we're going to mine the... let me get it. Hang on. Bear with me. I'll get it. There we go. We're making extensive use of the Lenny and Tashi book, Evaluating Communication for Development. And we're going to plough this right the way through. So you are going to be set up with a very detailed overview of these ideas. They're incorporated into the workshop evaluation material that we provide. And then that will couple with the work that you're undertaking with John in the workshop sessions. And what I want to look at this week in the lecture is there are alternative models of evaluation systems that you can use when you're looking at a community development project, and these have implications for what we get in, what we put into a development project, and what we get out of a development project, and how we justify the funding that we receive for it, the approach that we take to undertaking it, and the objectives and the social impact that we feel that the project will achieve. So this is important to understand, because then if you understand this process, it gives you the capability to be able to look at different practices and different models and different ways that community media is put into practice. That's the simplest way of saying it. So what we'll look at is the idea go over the idea again of what these tools are for. These are evaluation tools. And what they do is they involve people in the process. And the aim of this process is to tightly knit people into the development cycle and the evaluation process, so that we're not looking at people as separate categories, as you might get in a kind of a more instrumental type process. But you kind of looking for ways, and what I'll do next week is I'll introduce, I think what we need to do is talk about what ethnography is, because that comes out of this. This is what it's based on. And although it's not an explicit aim of what I want to do in this module, actually I think having some discussion about what a people-centred focus on evaluation and research can achieve and can bring to our understanding of how these projects might work. So we're thinking about... I've found some useful links I found a UNICEF article that identifies evaluation techniques, and it's kind of the aim, I think, with a lot of international community development projects are focused on behavioural change and a change in people's approaches to the situation and the circumstances that they are living in. So that then leads to it's kind of informed behavioural change for cultural change, economic change, political change, although that might not be a big priority in some circumstances. What I think would be useful for us is if we can establish case studies, and that's something that I know that we really need to develop in this module and other modules, is to kind of really use some existing case studies and to look at how they've been evaluated and what the kind of criteria for evaluation are. I've printed off copies of the UNESCO Community Media Good Practice Handbook, which was written by Steve Buckley, and this has a lot of, particularly in community radio, a lot of case studies of different activities from around the world. So it'd be useful for us to prompt our discussions and thoughts about how these projects are evaluated. So really, this is kind of like guidance for evaluation. What do we need to know when we're putting in place a framework for evaluation, and on what basis does this work? Now, this is related to a form of social evaluation called action research, which is a particular form. It's like a kind of, plan, act, reflect process. It has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. It can be a little bit kind of simplistic in terms of you kind of need to know what you're looking for before you go out there. And sometimes that's difficult because, we can sit here in the UK and we can plan based on our limited cultural knowledge, a set of programs and exchange activities. And when we reach our destination and we visit a community in another culture, all of that planning goes out of the window, and you have to adapt it on the ground. And you've got to be thoughtful, mindful, and open to the local circumstances and the local form of culture that is shared between people living in those communities. So what we want to do is those circumstances, we're thinking about taking a more holistic approach. And this contrasts with, this is kind of very much set up as a kind of almost like a dualism in a way, is kind of a systems approach and a holistic approach. So this draws on, if you draw your minds back to last year and the community development work that we looked at, what is community development? This is kind of, very much fitting in that kind of vein. What kind of logical framework do we want to put in place? Because we get a different picture. If we apply a different frame of analysis, we get a different picture, and we get different results. We tell a different story. So one of the things we're keen to do is we're keen to separate what are the apparent effects and the apparent causes. We are trying as much as possible to not to jump to any conclusions, not to prefigure in our minds any kind of particular, well, we see people behaving in this particular way, therefore that must have been caused by X, Y, or Z. And this goes back to what Herbert Blumer we talked about when we talked about symbolic interactionism. It's the uncoupling of the cause and effect model. And what we need to remember is that we need to observe and empirically participate and understand what is actually going on rather than just using our assumptions. So we're thinking about this in terms of, the idea that one of the first steps that we need to undertake when we work with people is an understanding of what the ecology is around them, the communications ecology, the media ecology. Where does it fit? So if we're encouraging people to, write blogs and record radio programs, how does that fit within the existing media systems? And how is that sustainable as a model of communication, given the resources and the economic capabilities that different communities have? So there's a lot of questions to ask, and I think this kind of summed up, if you like, between almost two choices, and it's the kind of, do we draw on a technical response to a situation, a kind of technocratic management-based response, or do we draw on a social response where we look for cultural values and we look at the idea of what we might call we look to social change models of kind of thinking about how social change works in practice and not just in theory, in an abstract approach, but is actually relevant to the experiences and the worldviews and the values and the emotionality and the cultural connections that people have in different circumstances. So rather thoughtful one this week. I will just about to go and post the notes up onto the DMU Commons wiki. You can access that at wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. They're available as a PDF. If you wish to engage in some discussion about this, you can always visit DMU Talk, which is talk.our.dmu.ac.uk, and just select any of the topics, add a new topic if you want to, that'll be good. And yes, so we'll see you at the lecture on Tuesday.